Hey everyone, we had some great news come out of Apple's quarterly earnings call, but then you might say, well, if there was great news coming out of the quarterly earnings call, why did the stock price fall in the last month? Well, there was not only great news, there was a batch of mixed news that came out of Apple as well. But this part that I'm going to share with you is mostly very good news for Apple stock investors. So let's get right into this brief video. So Apple saw June quarter records for advertising revenue, the App Store, and the Music Store. And this is especially important for Apple because the thing that those three all have in common is that they are very lucrative sources of revenue, very high profit margin sources of revenue because they don't come with the offsetting cost of goods sold like an iPad, an iPhone, or a Mac computer would, right? That costs money to create those. The advertising, App Store, and music side of the business are much higher profit margin sides of the business. And so growth in that area leads to exponentially better growth in Apple's profitability. Also, Apple noted that it surpassed over 2 billion active devices in use today. That's incredible, right? Over 2 billion devices in use, Apple devices in use today around the world. That's pretty remarkable. And its installed base is the core strength of Apple, right? Because then it can sell these customers services, it can get these customers to upgrade to newer products. And so the fact that this keeps growing is great news for Apple stock investors. Also, Apple surpassed 1 billion paid subscriptions across its services segment. That's up by over 150 million in the last year. Remarkable. The company added 150 million paying subscribers just in the last year alone. That's nearly double the amount they had just 3 years ago. So that side of the business growing extremely well, and that's been great news for Apple stock investors. The company ended the quarter with over $166 billion in cash and marketable securities. If you think about it, the let's say the 6-month government bond yield right now is at about 5.5%. That means Apple can make just about $8 billion in interest income off of this $166 billion in cash if it just puts it in ultra safe 6-month government securities. That's remarkable, right? $8 billion of interest income. Net cash, however, was $57 billion as the company has been increasing its long-term debt on purpose so that it can balance out the equity and cash balance. It wants to achieve a net cash neutral position. It doesn't want to have all this cash on hand. It wants to return some of that to shareholders because it's very hard for Apple to find useful investment for this much money. Yes, they can put it in government securities, but so can you, the shareholder. So why would Apple keep that money just to put it in government securities? If Apple doesn't have opportunities to invest that capital in new products, innovation, and so on, it wants to return that cash to shareholders. And one way it did that is by repurchasing 103 million of Apple shares. Management believes that the stock is undervalued, right? And they're backing that up by spending money to back up that claim that they think their stock price is undervalued. And they say, hey, as long as our stock price is where it is, we're just going to keep buying shares. And 100 million worth, right? 100 million shares. And the share price is, over $100 per share. So you can, figure how much they actually spent on share buybacks, right? So, and they actually say it here, they returned over $24 billion to shareholders, including $3.8 billion in dividends and $18 billion of open market repurchases. So they've spent $18 billion in the most recent quarter buying back Apple stock. So overall, this part of Apple's conference call highlighted a lot of the positives of the business. I have other videos going over the headwinds and the difficulties Apple faced in the most recent quarter. But all of these things I mentioned here are really great news for Apple stock investors, right? So thank you so much for watching. I hope I'll see you again soon. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.